40 years ago, a young Russian boy learned art, and he did so well with it, it was so provocative, it was so compelling, that the communist government that he was living under started to use it as propaganda for not only Russians, but for the world, for them to see how Russian children loved living under a communist regime with free healthcare, free education, free housing. Well, that child became a teenager, and at the age of 14, he became a dissident artist, fighting against the system that he once touted as being great. It wasn't. And over the next several years, because of his art, he was arrested multiple times. Trying to find a way out of the system, he eventually, in 1991, moved to the United States, where 26 years later, he's now considered one of the most prolific political artists of our generation. You may have seen him in the Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, and of course, on the cover of the National Review magazine. This episode of Whiskey Politics will be speaking with principal artist and contributing editor at National Review, Roman Genn. Welcome, Roman.
Thank you.
In 2012, during the presidential debate between President Obama and Mitt Romney suggested that the greatest geopolitical threat of our time was Russia. And of course, if most people will remember that Obama came back with his well-rehearsed quip and said that the 1980s called and asked for their foreign policy back. Do you agree with Mitt Romney some 5 years later almost, with Russia in the headlines every single day almost at this point?
Well, Russia is a geopolitical threat in 2012, in 2008, in 2006, in 2016. It's always a geopolitical threat. Until the mentality of the people who are running that country changes somewhat, which is not going to happen in the nearest future, as far as I can tell. It will happen eventually. My take on it is that Russia is very, as somebody said, misdeveloped. It's not underdeveloped, but it is misdeveloped. It has a certain mentality which is not dissimilar to mentality of the Weimar Germans or 19th century British colonial mentality, which was, I guess, a prevalent mentality a certain time ago. But it is, as I hate to agree with Secretary Kerry, but it is a mentality that is outdated, and they need to change it. It will take some time, perhaps 20 years, perhaps 50 years for them to change it. So until that happens, Russia is a geopolitical threat to the Western world, to the liberal, in a traditional sense, Western mentality.
You grew up in Russia. You were a dissident as an artist in Russia before you left in 1991.
Right.
And you've come here and you are prolific as an artist now from a political standpoint. When you take a look, and I know that you have done a lot of art regarding Putin, for example. There was one that was very well known. It had blood marks all over him.
Right.
What are your thoughts when you see Putin and possibly finger marks with them right now hacking into the DNC, or their fingerprints on Syria, or their global expansionist schemes that they have, at least regionally right now? Is that a concern for you?
Well, that is somewhat of a concern. It's not a serious concern as they cannot really hurt us because they don't have an economy to do that. Russia has a very weak economy, but it can make it difficult. It's like somebody, removing your garbage can or something, ruining your, putting a dead cat on your steps. It's not going to destroy your house, but it makes your life unpleasant. So in this sense, I don't think they can damage the United States, but they can make quite a lot of mischief around the world, and also they do make tremendous amount of damage and bring tragedy and poverty and disaster to people neighboring with them, like Ukraine currently that they're occupying.
You had a front row seat to perestroika
Right.
and Gorbachev's glasnost in the 1980s. He was trying to open up Russia to the world, and obviously working with Ronald Reagan. A lot's changed since that time. A lot of folks on the right are making observations to how communists tried, in your case, to squelch any kind of dissent. And today in the United States, we have this growing sense that there's certain things that you can't say here. Political correctness on college campuses, for example. And I know that you've done pieces on that. Do you see some similarity?
Well, I have a strange look on political correctness. For a satirist, it is definitely damaging to my profession. However, as a citizen, I do believe that some forms of it are probably necessary because it makes society run smoother and it makes people get along better if we are watchful about how insulting we can be to each other. However, I'm not just an average citizen. I am a satirist, so therefore, obviously, it is damaging to my profession, no question about it. So, it's not what Russian censorship was. It's quite different, because Russian censorship was you cannot criticize Communist Party and the ruling class. Other than that, you can insult each other at will. And I think part of the problem, which was a breakdown of the Soviet Union, was actually lack of political correctness, because various ethnic groups inside Russia hated each other and were not careful and watchful about what they say. So I have, I don't know if it's answered your question, but so I have this very strange look on political correctness.
So I understand you correctly. What you're saying is that there's a Goldilocks zone for political correctness. Too much is obviously not good.
But who is to decide?
And too little is that creates problems between ethnicities. I mean, you see that in Russia with the Chechens. And
with Chechens, with everyone. All the ethnic groups. Tatars were fighting with Bashkirs. Lithuanians were fighting with Latvians. I mean, everyone was. The Tajiks were fighting with Uzbeks. Azerbaijanis were fighting with Armenians. All kinds of things. So precisely because there was none of that wisdom of ethnic harmony, which I do believe we have in the United States. People don't think we do, but we do. We have this very, very smooth, I believe, relationship between various ethnic groups here, and that is partly due to political correctness, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And part of that is due to the entire approach of political correctness in our universities. And you've done some pieces on this, and the approach that the left takes is that we don't have harmony, that there's racism in anybody's dissension to political correctness or worry. And so do you worry that might be going too far on the left side?
It's definitely going too far, but people have the need to scratch mosquito bites and sell them as war wounds. That is...
Is that a Russian thing? I love it.
Possibly. So, I don't remember where it's from. So maybe I made it up. But people here, I remember during the Bush years, people would come to, at some Hollywood home, they would come to someone who said something against Bush and would slap him on the shoulder and say, "Oh my God, you're so brave," as if Bush will send or Cheney will send a squad to arrest him or kill him. But they believe that he would. So it's kind of a weird pretense world that the left has in this country, thinking that they are somehow endangered by something. Mm-hmm. So no one's coming after them, no one's arresting them, no one's putting them to jail for anything. But they need to believe that they're fighting, that they're actually struggling, that they're at war, that they're brave,
Well, coming from being arrested for having a voice to now being in an open area of freedom where you can be criticized for having a voice, obviously there's a big difference there. And, the question is whether or not we're moving in the direction of where you came from or whether there's a balance. And another issue that I wanted to discuss with you, however, is we were talking before, having a drink, and you were saying that...
Well, it's whiskey politics after all.
It should be vodka politics tonight.
It should be. And Trump's not even a president yet.
We're a couple of days away.
Right.
And when people see this, I think it will be the next day. But tonight, technically, 2 days before Inauguration Day, is the 8th anniversary of you being in Afghanistan. You were embedded with the at a forward operating base with the is it the 3rd Infantry, the 8th Division of the Marines?
It was, I think,
the 3rd Battalion,
right.
8th Marines. Okay, and you were embedded, and basically it was at a time where it was relatively becoming a little bit more peaceful there. The Taliban were being squashed. And tell us what has happened since. I mean, it's been 7-8 years, and we've largely pulled out since that point.
Right. Well, Obama, as I was flying back, actually, exactly 8 years ago, they announced in the plane that congratulations, we have now a new president in the United States, and everybody started applauding and cheering and all that. So, I was there for first time that I was there was under Bush. Second time we went there was under Obama surge, which was in 2011.
Right.
So when we were there was one battalion of Marines who was covering the whole south from Kandahar to Farah mountains in Farah. So it was Kandahar, Helmand, and Farah. So then there was, of course, the surge. So there was, I think, 5 battalions when we went there second time, which was quite different. It was in Marinistan. So now, as we know, Obama ended all wars, and Taliban, unfortunately, retook places where we were stationed, which is we were in Helmand. So Helmand is almost entirely under control of Taliban, as we know as of today. So the Marja, where we were, is taken by Taliban. Sangin, a lot of guys lost their lives there. A lot of people were maimed. So the result of Obama policy of 8 years of ending wars is that the people who were previously driven out of Helmand came back and retook the cities. So.
And this was the Taliban, and they've gained their power mostly through opium as an economic force for them, or
well, they were warrior tribesmen, for centuries. I mean, I'm rereading Churchill's history of the Malaccan field force. So he was not far from there, and he was describing the Pashtun warriors exactly as a reporter might describe them today. Same. It's warrior tribes who are living either in the mountains or in the valleys there. And today, yes, you're quite right. The main source of their finances come from opium poppies that they grow. Right. So it's 90% of the opium poppies are grown in Helmand.
So where you were 8 years ago tonight, could you be there right now safely?
If we brought some vodka with us, we probably could be.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. I don't think we could. I mean, I haven't looked at the map as far as far as I know, we couldn't. No.
Okay. So from what I've read and understand is that a lot of that area in central Afghanistan has basically now been more or less nickeled away by the Taliban and the different tribes that have come in. And by us pulling out, there's a vacuum that's been left there.
Vacuum, and also, I mean, Afghan National Army cannot hold on its own.
Right.
A lot of people that we knew there were killed since
Right.
then. So a lot of people who were helping us out got killed. Locals who were pro-American, or it's difficult to say how pro-American they were. They cooperated with America.
Right.
So they, of course, were interested in the survival of their tribes. So they cooperated with the Taliban, with Americans, and then before that with the Russians or against the Russians. So it's tangled loyalties in that region.
It's somewhat ironic because you're only a few years younger than I am. You remember the 1980s and Russia in Afghanistan.
Right. Very well. Yeah.
And then it was the 2000s with America and Afghanistan, where you're living in America now. So you've seen Afghanistan throughout your entire life as just a battlefront.
I thought about it. I did not go to the Soviet War. I was not old enough, and also I didn't want to go. It was quite an unpopular war.
Right.
So, but there is a huge influence, Russian influence in Afghanistan. Every officer above the rank of major was Soviet trained.
Right.
So in the current Afghan army under Americans.
Yeah.
So most I mean we didn't meet one officer who was above the rank of major who was not Soviet trained. So because Muj, with all due respect to their fighting skills, do not do staff work. So so the staffers were everyone was Russian trained.
Oh, it's interesting.
But also people in up north, I did not, if I didn't see it with my own eyes, actually were quite welcoming. They thought Russians came back in one form or the other when they heard us speaking. So they were quite happy. In the south, it's quite a different story because most of the fighting was in the south. So of course, the Soviets committed quite a lot of atrocities.
Right.
But in Kabul, we were quite welcomed.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Let's move briefly to your art. And this is a piece that's going to be brought up here on the screen. Your most recent piece is Obama leaving the White House.
Right.
And you can look at this piece for probably a good, solid 20 minutes and see multi-levels that are in there. He's carrying out the bronze medal. You got the ambulance, crashed into the building. Talk to me about Obama leaving the White House and your opinions on that and what you see right now coming up with Trump entering.
Well, one circus, in exchange for the other. I have to admit that I just did the drawing. I did not think it through. It was editors' contributions. So our editors were making things up, adding them. Let's do this, let's do that, let's take this one out, let's take this, put this in. I prefer simple drawings. So
yeah.
But this one, I think it worked. It's an interesting piece. So I couldn't happen, soon enough. I mean, I'm ready for him to go. I'm so tired of drawing this guy.
Have you ever received any critical feedback that, let me put it to you this way. You see things happening like, different cartoonists around the world that are taking shots by, without getting into all the details on that. But there are some folks that take tremendous, they're tremendously sensitive to cartoons and right. Considered racism or,
right.
Have you taken some major arrows over the years from different folks?
I have, and I've been called everything by everyone. So I do believe I pissed off every group that was possible to piss off, except the middle-aged white men. For whatever reason, they just take the insults and.
We're used to it. We're used to it. Water off a duck's back.
Right. So that's the only group that stood, without.
But do you feel? I mean, when you take a look, and I didn't want to really get into this detail, but I want to just Charlie Hebdo, right? You go to the Paris situation that happened,
right.
A couple of years ago, the tragedy there, and if you drew Muhammad, for example, you'd have target on your back.
Right.
Okay? It's not quite that bad in the United States, but you are drawing, from a conservative point of view, President Obama, okay, who a lot of people basically view from an analytical perspective, you know, and I'm just wondering, you know, the barrage of hits that you took, what was that like for you?
Well, I would draw Muhammad if they would print it. I mean, we're only as brave as our editors are. So if editor says, you know, we're not gonna, I don't want to get killed, I got kids, and you know, then we do what the editor says. There's nothing we can do without the editor. So right. Charlie Hebdo editors were. I mean, it's a crazy publication. So I've looked at it. Some of it is very, very funny. Some of it I find, you know, less funny. But then I don't know French humor very well, so I don't. My French is rusty, rather. So it's difficult for me to judge on how funny it is. Well, my heart is obviously with the cartoonists on that one. So
of course,
we're you know it's a tragedy.
I think everybody's heart was with them.
No. Quite a lot of people say that they should have watched what they were doing, and you do not, do not shout fire in a crowded theater, and you don't do this, you don't do that. So they sort of deserved it. And quite a lot of people, like for example in Russia, they're saying that they deserved it because they make fun of Russian politicians, so they think that they sort of deserved it on that basis.
Okay,
they're not sympathetic to them. So I'm fully sympathetic to them, even though some of it was probably in bad taste, some of their drawings. So
Trump's coming in. By the time a lot of people see this, it will be within a few hours.
Right.
What are your thoughts of drawing him? I mean, you obviously are leaning right of center.
Right.
But any thoughts about Trump coming in and being able to draw?
Trump's great. I bought a lot of cadmium and yellow, cadmium yellow and cadmium red. So I'm ready.
Does that make orange?
That makes orange, and so I'm ready for Trump. I don't know if the rest of the world is ready, but I am.
That's great. That's great. Well, we're looking forward to seeing a lot more and many more years. And it's been wonderful speaking with you. You have a website?
I have a website.
RomanGenn.com, is it?
I think it is.
Okay, and that's G-E-N.
I'm not entirely sure, but I think that this is it. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Roman. And you could find us. Please subscribe to our Whiskey Politics podcast on YouTube, and you could also subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, and I think on Google Play. Give us a 5-star rating. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on Whiskey Politics.